Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So today we're going to continue our 5-episode special, which compares the different militaries of the Galactic Republic, Galactic Empire, and First Order. We've already talked about the training methods these organizations use. In last episode, we talked about their equipment and weapons. So please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and notification button so you don't miss out on the next few episodes in this series. And we'll also put all these videos together in a playlist for you. For a military organization to be successful, its leaders need to be the most capable, courageous, and dedicated individuals. The actions of a leader has the most far-reaching influence and consequences, and it's in the image of the leader that the organization will make itself into. Military leaders do not just dictate orders and strategize, they set the culture and atmosphere for the entire fighting force. While it's up to individual soldiers to win battles, it's the leaders who end up winning the war. In response to the threat that the Separatist army posed, Chancellor Palpatine was granted emergency power by the Senate, which was suggested by a Gungan who now is a clown. Yes, that's canon. Removing the Senate from the command structure made the GAR a much more effective fighting machine, devoid of politics, bureaucracy, and corruption. Directly beneath them was Master Yoda and the Jedi Council. They would command large system battle groups. Jedi Masters, Knights, and even Padawans would fill out the rest of the command chain all the way down to Regiment Commander. The Jedi principles of peace and compassion might seem counterintuitive on a battlefield, but the Jedi generals were extremely talented and courageous leaders. Most of them cared deeply for their soldiers. They naturally understood the responsibility of command, and therefore they chose to lead their men from the front, carrying out their own orders and taking a share of the danger. Many of the greatest leaders in history inspired their men by joining them on the front lines. Leaders like Alexander the Great, Patton, McChrystal, Gibson, Crow, and of course Gandalf. It was the Jedi's willingness to fight alongside their men that ended up winning their respect, and their superior fighting abilities further reinforced the invincible image they cultivated. The Jedi also shared some similarities with the clone troopers. Both were taken from birth to be trained as warriors and servants of the Republic, and neither the Jedi or clone troopers had mothers and fathers to raise them. This further created a bond between the commanders and their men. But the Jedi had many weaknesses as well. To start, they weren't trained military officers, and often led through pure skill and ability. Early in the war during the Battle of Geonosis, the Jedi recklessly led their men into a straight-on battle with the Separatist army. This lack of strategy and tactical awareness was alarming. The clone troopers suffered heavy casualties trying to advance across a wide-open field under heavy enemy fire without any cover. The Jedi's primitive tactics belonged on a medieval battlefield, not one bristling with droids, plasma cannons, and hover tanks. And since the Jedi were embedded in the front lines, they often lost sight of the entire battle. The Jedi had rarely commanded individuals outside of their own order, therefore they greatly underestimated the capabilities of their own men. And while they could use the Force to do all sorts of crazy things, the men who followed them could not. This would lead to many pointless head-on charges over exposed ground, which almost always led to heavy casualties. On top of that, the Clone War was unnecessarily prolonged by Palpatine's secret agenda, and constant battles started taking its toll on the Jedi and their clone troopers. Having been exposed to the galaxy and traveling to many different planets, the clone troopers started seeing through the indoctrination and propaganda of the Republic. They started realizing what a raw deal in life they've been given. And they started seeing the hypocrisy of the Jedi, who preached freedom and morality but led an army of essentially slaves. The Imperial military was created after the Jedi Purge, and all officers and soldiers had to swear loyalty to the Emperor in order to survive the transition. The Emperor ruled with an iron fist, and beneath him was his personal enforcer and second-in-command, Darth Vader. But the day-to-day tasks of running the military was handled by an assortment of admirals, moths, and generals. Many of the top positions were filled out by Clone War veterans from the disbanded GAR. New recruits were trained at the Imperial academies. Known for their high standards and sometimes deadly competition, the Imperial academies produced the finest officers in the galaxy. The Empire was mainly a peacekeeping force, and never really faced any large threat until the latter years of the Galactic Civil War. Therefore, the philosophy that ruled the Empire was internally focused. The Tarkin Doctrine stated that the rule through fear of force rather than force itself would ensure peace throughout the galaxy. This doctrine would be heavily incorporated into the Imperial military's philosophy and also affect how they treat their own soldiers. It was the fear created by Palpatine's Imperial machine that kept things going smoothly. It wasn't just the fear of being disloyal, it was also the fear of failure. Mistakes were heavily punished in the Empire and individualism was discouraged. The command structure was sacred and disobeying an order, no matter how irrational it was forbidden. In some ways, this made Imperial units less effective in the field, especially when they were cut off from command. Palpatine's Sith ideology also greatly influenced Imperial culture. The Sith believed in strength, and also encouraged anyone with the power to do so to rise up. They also believed in conflict, seeing it as a catalyst for growth and a tool to thin out those who were unworthy. This breeded a culture of institutionalized suspicion in the military, but also helped create some of the most cunning and influential leaders in the Empire. It also created unnecessary politics and infighting driven by fear, dishonesty, and betrayal. There was no Empire without Palpatine, and that was the fundamental flaw in his leadership. The organization was built around an individual and not the institution itself. And this system relied on fear that needed to be constantly enforced to keep people in check. When the Emperor and Darth Vader died, the main source of that fear died as well. The Empire collapsed into chaos and infighting ensued. Military leaders became warlords and started fighting for personal gain and power. At its core, the First Order was a military junta. It was created from the remnants of the Empire by officers who refused to accept the results of the Galactic Civil War. At the head of the shadowy organization was Supreme Leader Snoke, a powerful Force user. Beneath him was a powerful triumvirate who handled the day-to-day operations of the First Order military. There was General Armitage Hux, commander of Starkiller Base, Captain Phasma, leader of the Stormtrooper Corps, and Kylo Ren, head of the Knights of Ren. Together, they guided this extremely deadly and disciplined military force. Snoke was a wise leader. He claimed to have been alive for an extremely long period of time and had lived through the rise and fall of the Empire. Although he was a Force user, he was much more rational and cautious than Palpatine. The First Order was still struggling to rebuild itself and was outnumbered by the New Republic. Therefore, its leaders demanded efficiency out of its military. Captain Phasma frowned upon politics in her Stormtrooper Corps. She was a perfectionist and expected a high level of performance from her troops. She took it upon herself to remember the serial numbers of each one of her troopers. She also cared about individual soldiers that she thought were capable. At the same time, she considered weaker individuals like Finn's friend FN 2003 as dispensable and a liability to the rest of the First Order. General Hux was an intelligent commander who relied on technology and science to achieve his goals. He learned a great deal from his father Brendel Hux on how to create efficient and well-trained soldiers. As a matter of fact, he ended up boiling down the process into an exact science. The First Order soldiers were bred and trained and indoctrinated at birth to be the best. And because they were General Hux's own creation, he had the highest confidence in their ability. Kylo Ren was the third part of this command structure, and he headed a group of elite religious fanatics known as Knights of Ren. Little is known about them. Kylo Ren himself was a very erratic character, constantly dealing with internal personality issues. At his best, he drove fear into the hearts of his enemies like Darth Vader did for the Empire. But at worst, he was a mentally unstable young man who was prone to violent outbursts and had self-confidence issues. The First Order adopted many of the best ideas from the Empire and learned from the Emperor's mistakes. But behind the scenes, a powerful Force wielder still held the reins, and it was still unknown what role Kylo Ren and Snoke will play in the coming events. The Jedi gave individuality to a force of identical clones. They showed compassion to men who were programmed to follow them no matter what. And it was through their actions they won the respect of the clones they served with. As the war went on, they also became better military strategists and tactical leaders, but at the end of the day, their commander-in-chief was constantly sabotaging the JAR's efforts, which dragged the war on much longer than necessary. But nonetheless, few officers in the Empire or First Order had the same capabilities and talents that the Jedi officers did. The Galactic Empire was similar to Nazi Germany post-1942. It was spread thin across too many fronts. A culture of fear resided within the ranks, and the lunatic in charge wasted resources on ineffective superweapon projects and chased supernatural artifacts. Despite having one of the most disciplined military organizations in the entire galaxy, Palpatine's Sith ideology created unnecessary chaos and fear that oftentimes hampered with the military's operations. Palpatine's unwillingness to consider alternative solutions drove the Empire down a path full of strategic errors and defeats, which allowed a tiny rebellion to grow into a formidable opposition force. If the Galactic Empire was Germany post-1942, then the First Order was Nazi Germany during the opening years of the war. Facing strict military and economic sanctions from a military defeat from decades before, it had an extremely efficient, technologically advanced, and well-equipped fighting force which focused on lightning-fast blitzkrieg attacks. Their ranks were bolstered by some of the best officers in the galaxy, survivors of a previous war. But like the post-1942 Nazis and Galactic Empire, it is still unknown if their leader is truly a leader trying to bring peace and order to the galaxy, or just another crazy lunatic. So guys, that's our analysis of the leadership abilities of these three organizations. Tell us what you think, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the notification button so you know when we come out with our next few videos. We'll be covering naval power between these three organizations, as well as their combat effectiveness, and we'll end by choosing which military organization we think is the most powerful. So guys, thanks for joining us, and if you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.